The Whispering Shadows, Part 3. Lucy's eyes were blank and distant as Ben and Sarah guided her out of the hollow. The house stood silent now, but the stillness felt unnatural, like the calm before a storm. The oppressive air that had once surrounded the house seemed to hang over them, even as they reached the edge of the woods. The relief they expected to feel never came. "Lucy, are you okay?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling as she glanced at Lucy, who hadn't spoken since waking up. Lucy nodded slowly, her expression unreadable. "I think so," she said softly, though her voice sounded different, almost hollow. As they made their way back to town, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Lucy's movements were stiff, almost mechanical, and her eyes no longer had the warmth they once held. Ben noticed it too, but neither of them said anything. They were too exhausted, too relieved to have escaped the house. But the uneasy feeling gnawed at them. That night, Ben and Sarah couldn't sleep. The whispers, once distant and fading, returned, this time louder, closer. They echoed in the corners of their rooms, chilling their very bones. It was as if the house was still watching them, waiting for something. The next day, Lucy didn't show up for school. When Ben called her house, her mother answered, saying Lucy hadn't come out of her room all morning. "She's been acting strange," her mother said, her voice filled with worry, like she's not really here. Ben and Sarah rushed over, dread building with every step. When they arrived, Lucy's mother led them to her room. She knocked softly. "Lucy, your friends are here." No response. Ben hesitated before opening the door. Inside, the room was dark, the curtains drawn tight. Lucy sat on the edge of her bed, staring blankly at the wall. Her eyes, once full of life, were now shadowed, as if something was draining her from the inside. "Lucy," Ben whispered, stepping toward her. "Are you okay?" She didn't respond at first. Then slowly, she turned to look at him, and when she did, he felt a chill run down his spine. Her eyes had darkened, the faint shadow they'd noticed before now more pronounced. It was as if something else was looking out through her. "They're still here," Lucy murmured, her voice low and distant. "I can hear them." Ben's heart raced. "Who's still here?" "The voices. The ones from the house," she said, her gaze drifting back to the wall. "They're inside me now," Sarah gasped, backing away. "We freed them, didn't we?" "You said we freed them." Lucy shook her head. "We freed them from the house, but they're not gone. They're with me. They're part of me now." Panic gripped Ben. "There has to be a way to fix this. Maybe we can." "You can't fix it," Lucy interrupted, her voice taking on a strange tone, almost as if someone else was speaking through her. "They don't want to leave. They were trapped for so long, and now they want something more." Ben and Sarah exchanged terrified glances. "What do they want?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Lucy's lips twisted into a smile, one that didn't reach her eyes. "They want to live again. Through me." Without warning, the air in the room grew cold and the lights flickered. Lucy's body jerked, her limbs stiffening as if being controlled by invisible strings. Her head tilted back, her eyes rolling up into her skull as the faint whispers began again, swirling around the room like a storm. Ben and Sarah froze, paralyzed by fear. The temperature dropped further, their breath visible in the freezing air. Shadows flickered at the edges of the room, moving unnaturally, as if they had a life of their own. Lucy's body began to rise from the bed, her feet hovering inches above the ground. Her mouth opened, but the voice that came out was not hers. It was deeper, older, filled with a malevolent glee. "She belongs to us now." The voice rasped, "Her soul is ours." Ben lunged forward, grabbing Lucy's arm, trying to pull her back down. "No, you can't have her!" The shadows in the room surged, wrapping around him like icy tendrils. He gasped, the cold seeping into his bones, but he held on, refusing to let go. "Lucy, fight them!" he shouted. "You're stronger than this." For a moment the shadows hesitated, and Lucy's body stopped its unnatural rise. Her eyes flickered, as if she was struggling to break free. "Ben," she whispered, her voice weak and strained. I can't hold them much longer." "You can," Ben yelled, his voice shaking. "We're not leaving you." The room shuddered, the whispers growing louder, more frantic. The shadows recoiled, writhing as if in pain. Lucy's body fell back onto the bed, her eyes wide with terror. For a brief moment the air stilled. Then just as quickly the shadows lunged again, this time toward Ben and Sarah. "Get out!" Lucy screamed, her voice her own once more. "Before they take you too." Ben hesitated, but Sarah grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the door. "We have to go," she cried, tears streaming down her face. As they stumbled out of the room, the door slammed shut behind them with a deafening bang. The house shook, and the whispers became deafening, filling the air with their desperate, angry voices. But through the chaos, Ben could still hear Lucy's voice pleading with them to leave. Outside, the world was quiet. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the ground, but nothing could feel as dark as what they had just left behind. Ben and Sarah stood on the sidewalk, gasping for breath, their hearts pounding. "We have to help her," Ben said, his voice barely audible. "But how?" Sarah asked, her face pale with fear. She's gone, Ben. Those things, whatever they are, they've taken her." Ben shook his head, determination hardening his voice. "She's not gone. Not yet. We're going to get her back." Sarah looked at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. "How? We barely survived last time." Ben clenched his fists. "I don't know, but I'm not leaving her in there with them, not without a fight." As they stood there, a chilling realization settled over them. The house had let them go, but Lucy was still trapped. And now the voices were free, searching for a way to live again. Ben knew, deep down, that the fight was far from over.